Welcome back. And this video is meant to outline the purpose of practice when it comes to silence skills. And this is kind of a paradox because silence on its own is ubiquitous. You can always access silence, no matter how noisy something is, no matter how much motion is happening. There's always kind of space around the noise and stillness beneath the motion. So on one hand, again, it's all over. But on the other hand, we are beings with a brain and neurons. And our neurons grow in certain ways based on how we use them. And so when we talk about the value of practicing skillful silence, we're talking about the ability to sustain the engagement with silence skills. And again, what this looks like, I can speak to it directly because I've been practicing silence skills for about 10 years and my nervous system feels significantly different. I have more access to a sustained version of stillness and spaciousness. I can kind of grab it more easily. The door, if you will, went from a little mouse-sized door to something bigger, and I can go there more often. And so again, the point, my encouragement, when I consider myself an advocate for silence practice, I'm encouraging you to start that practice now, because it's truly not something that you can fake. It's not something that you can buy. And I hypothesize that as the world continues to get noisier, as our experience continues to get more and more fragmented, the ability to sustain silence and to be rooted consistently will actually be a very, very valuable quality to have. And so what is the practice of silence? It's a little bit difficult to name because it's not a destination that you get to. You never become perfectly silent, just like you never kind of shed the pressures of ego. You never reach utopia in that sense. And it's also not a behavioral skill like we're used to practicing. When we talk about behavior skills, we're talking about actions that would chain together and we bring into our experience and grow that ability to do that behavioral chain when we need to. With silence skills, it's more about remembering. It's more about coming back to in a particular way or seeing through a particular lens often and doing that consistently so that lens of spaciousness, of groundedness is more easily accessible. The word mindfulness actually comes from the word to remember, which really speaks about the mechanism of practice. The practice is just one where we're encouraged to remember. And so now that we know that the mechanism of practice or that mechanism of neurological growth is one of remembering, we have to specify what it is that we're remembering. And so the first thing I want to identify are characteristics of skillful silence. And they're kind of, pointers to what we are remembering. And so first, skillful silence is simple, not complex. There's only one brand of silence. There's only one type of emptiness. Even as it meets different scenarios, it really is always the same. And with that sameness comes a deep simplicity. Next, skillful silence is connected, not differentiated. And again, we can refer back to those axes. That pursuit of excellence axis is differentiated. There's utility and a need to be an individual, a somebody. In the wholeness axis, you are part of a whole. And so skillful silence is connected. Next, skillful silence is not in opposition to the excellent skills. It's in complement. And we might think about this like the yin-yang symbol. We can also say this with silence itself. Noise doesn't break silence. It's not this fragile glass that gets broken every time there's noise. Silence is the space around noise. Similarly, the practice of nobodiness isn't meant as an escape or as to negate your inevitable need to be a somebody. It's meant to complement them. So again, skillful silence, it's not in opposition to, it's not to remove the excellence axis, it's to complement that. And beyond just the characteristics themselves, the utility of our language or our shared culture gives us an opportunity to pull in more defined skills that bring us closer to silence. And so again, these aren't things meant to create the destination of silence. You aren't expected to get somewhere that's perfectly silent, perfectly still, perfectly whole. But these skills are well known in our culture enough to really emphasize them as pillars of practice. The first skill is presence. And of course, that's when you think about mindfulness, you think about presence, be in the now. And it is a very simple recognition that this moment on the timeline is all that you have access to. It doesn't mean that the past and future aren't relevant. They're relevant as our minds, of course, build on them. But there's this deep sense of freedom, of spaciousness when we come into this moment and we access it fully. There's also a bit of a grief or a letting go, a willingness to let go for kind of two reasons. One, a lot of us have a lot of weight put in our past and in our futures, and our sense of self is rigidly built on those two parts. And to really come into the present, to see, oh yeah, this is what I got, it can shake that. And that can be something to grieve. How much importance have you put into past and future? And then secondly, the basic simplicity of it is something to grieve. The mind is constantly making more complexity. And to access presence, it's, yes, freeing and relieving. It feels like a breath of fresh air, but it's also sometimes simple in a way that makes you feel let down. So yes, presence is a massive skill of this, and we'll continue to come back to that. But it's not this kind of heal all. It's not something that you access once and then you say, oh yes, here I am, present for all times. It's something that you come back to again and again in a way that's not always easy. Second skill is ease, or we might say relaxation, but I'm going to talk about it as a type of integrated ease predominantly. So yes, I will certainly include videos that are more about formal relaxation, including sleep. I know that sleep is a really needed problem area, we can call it, for a lot of people, especially people that come to my office seeking psychological care. And so I certainly will talk to that specifically, but for now I'm talking about integrated ease. And you might think about that as the type of ease that's right alongside effort. And if you ever take a yoga class or some kind of mindful movement class, they'll literally use the phrase, the balance of effort and ease. And that's useful. Ease isn't, or actually I'll say it this way, most of the ways that we know ease, and again, this kind of relates back to that hypothesis of we're only exposed to unskillful silence, most of the way that we relate to ease is in this kind of off switch. Whether that's through substances or distractions, or again, just the numbness of sleep, we seek a type of ease that's like turning off. And skillful silence says, can you weave ease into your daily expression? So can you do something challenging and have soft shoulders? Can you soften the edges of your voice when you're having a difficult conversation? And there's, just a variety of benefits of this, including a really strong one, which is our physical body needs it. We can't just rely on our sleep to be our dose of ease. A lot of us are chronically stressed to a point of real issue. And so learning how to integrate ease into a daily experience is kind of like a superpower. And then final skill here is compassion. And compassion, otherwise known as care, just basic loving kindness. It's a certain warmth that we feel towards others. This is both a foundational way of being that we can access when we get through all the debris in our mind, but also a bit of a compass, a certain director around the silence skills. One of the reasons for that is that when you do start to come into yourself, when you start to practice silence, it's actually very uncomfortable. You might start practicing because you want something more relaxing, more easeful, but you find, especially in the initial stages of establishing a meditation practice, you find there's a lot of defenses in the mind. And to acknowledge that and to process that, to integrate that, is not comfortable. And so we need compassion, not just as a warmth we're expressing towards others and a kind of a director as to where we are going to end up with this wholeness practice, but also as a real necessary skill that we're directing towards ourselves when inevitably our practice of ease is flawed and uncomfortable and aversive in the early stages. And so all that to say, silence is a skill in the sense that it's useful, but it's also a skill in the sense that it's trainable. I am not someone who just naturally accessed silence. I trained myself in it, and not perfectly, but I have spent time on the cushion, as they say, in contemplation of this, in actual practice of this. You can't think your way into it. You can't say, yeah, that sounds great in theory, but I'm not going to practice it. It is hard, but the only way to actually build those neural pathways, to strengthen that access, is to practice it in real time. And so this is your invitation. This is your invitation not to drop out of your life, to go live on a mountaintop where things are easy and peaceful, but to recognize and hold yourself accountable to practicing silence skills wherever you are.